What is no-code and why is it the future of development? I think this is a really interesting question to ask, and a serious one at that, because I know that when technologies came out like Web 2.0 or React.js, they fundamentally changed the ecosystem for us programmers, the types of jobs we could apply for, and much more. No-code will do the same, and not enough people are asking this question. Let me give you some background. If you've been living under a digital rock, you might not have noticed that there's a whole new range of software and tools being released recently, left, right, and center, that basically change how we build websites, making it easier and faster to do so. We're seeing the rise of artificial intelligence, which is starting to write the code for us. We're seeing tools around design software like Figma, where it creates the code and the components for us as well. And we're seeing the rise of visual tools that allow us to create websites without the manual labor of writing every single line of code ourselves, commonly known to as no-code tools. Us developers are used to things changing a lot and not at all. For example, we see fads come and go with new languages being created almost every other month. But no-code is here to stay. Similar to TypeScript, it's just changing the fundamental way that we create on the web. And for most people, this change has almost gone unseen, happening in the background slowly as we continue to learn programming. More and more companies, whether they're marketing agencies or web companies or branding or creative agencies, are slowly migrating to no-code tools to start to deliver their client websites. Let me run you through the traditional approach for creating a website and how no-code steps in the middle of this and really changes up how we approach this whole thing. Normally, you would have a salesperson go out to a lead or a client and talk to them, make a website sale, and collect some information for a graphics designer. The graphics designer's job then is to craft maybe a logo, a color scheme, or a design scheme, as well as the website and maybe some other pages there for the client to approve to be handed over to a developer. Now, these designs are normally made in software like Adobe XD or Figma. They're just visual, nothing else. The developer's job, therefore, is to actually handcraft those designs into code so that they work on all the browsers and all the mobile devices and much more. And this is the longest part of the process. For a developer, normally it can take between weeks to months to be able to create that design in code. And they might use tools as well, such as React or Next.js, or maybe they use some CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or, for example, Tailwind CSS. But this process is a lengthy one, and one that requires a lot of attention to detail. Even when they come back with changes in the future where the client might need some text updated or images, the developer has to again handcraft and make those changes. What ends up happening is that no-code steps in and provides the exact same results that you normally have through the development lifecycle that a programmer would achieve, but being able to do this in half the time, if not faster. As a business, whether you're a marketing company or whether you're an agency, having the ability to cut down maybe 80 hours of work down to 40 hours means that you can deliver that website or that project for much less. Or you can gain a lot more profit by doing the same website for the same price in half the time. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense for these agencies to start adopting no-code tools. It's part of the reason why you saw WordPress adopted so much in the past, as well as Elementor and maybe Visual Composer, and yet those tools were just add-ons to an existing framework. They weren't dedicated to create and deliver websites using no-code, but they were a stepping stone into what we're seeing now in the future. And so what I've been seeing, especially over the last few years, is wide-scale adoption of these no-code tools, especially by designers and web companies. And yet developers aren't doing enough to talk about what's happening in this ecosystem. So no-code isn't specifically taking developers out of the equation, but rather providing new tools to be able to do the things that they're currently learning on. Things like, for example, the grid system, or maybe doing the box model, and much more. And yet the main thing that I think is a responsibility for developers to do is to constantly stay aware of the future possibilities that they need, especially when they're moving into their careers and the workplace. And this is why I think it's so important that if you want to stay ahead of this curve, you start learning these tools now. And so by learning this environment now, you'll be preparing yourself for future career opportunities, as well as gaining a higher salary or keeping yourself relevant in the current job that you're in. On top of that, learning to use no-code tools. While maybe a GUI interface doesn't sound as fun as typing all the code out manually, you'll gain a better perspective and understanding of some of the implementations of maybe components as well as different types of styling that you might not otherwise do, and hopefully this should help your programming skills as well. So let's start right now. We're going to take a look at EditorX. It's a brand new platform built from the ground up to perform no-code and create websites in a matter of minutes. We're going to have a look at how it works, as well as some of the things that we'll be learning throughout the next couple of videos and some of the benefits you'll get from learning such tools. I'm also going to add a link in the description below where you guys can try this out, because without actually trying it yourselves, you won't be able to experience. So feel free to follow along with me on this video. The first thing we're going to do is just type in EditorX here on Google and head to the very first link, which is editorx.com. Here we've got the dashboard that we can log into, so I'm just going to select Start Now here at the very top. And if you've got an account already, you can just log in. If you need to sign up, you can sign up just over here. I've got an account, so I'm going to use that here to sign in via Google. And this will take me straight into my dashboard. Now, the very first thing I want to do is create a brand new site. I'm going to create a new site that's going to be plain so we can have a look at how EditorX works, as well as some of these no-code tools, and get a better idea of what we'll be doing for the future videos. I'm going to select Other, and then I'm going to select just to create the blank template here using the blank canvas. And we're going to select this one, which will load us into the dashboard for EditorX. This might be the very first time you're looking at a no-code platform, and it's quite simple and yet very powerful at the same time. Let's have a look at a very simple task like adding a button. We have the select plus sign here at the top where we can quickly add elements. And we're going to drag and literally drop a button element here on the page. Now this button element we can resize, we can change the text of to say something new, as well as added the styling for it quite quickly and easily, whether it's left position, center position, and lots more. But what I want to showcase on this button is the fact that if we were to try and recreate this button in HTML and CSS, the differences of how quickly it takes to do. Here is an example of HTML code. If I was trying to make this button in normal code, what I would have to do is write something like this with a div. And this might have a class, and this class could be called button. And then what I'd have to do is write in some styling. And this styling would need to use the class button and maybe have a border radius of say maybe 50 pixels, a width of say 200 pixels. We would need to have a font family, and we would put in a custom one. We would need to have a font size, maybe 16 pixels. After that, we would also need a background color. So in this case, it is black. And then we'd also need a color for the font, which is white. And all of this just to recreate this exact same button would take us at least a minute or two. Whereas now, using no code, we can literally drag and drop it onto the page. But that's not all. Right now, this button is positioned in the page on the bottom left of the hero section. And for us to be able to do this, we would need to use positioning. So maybe an absolute position, which would be positioned maybe 25%, or in this case, I think it's about 75% from the top, and maybe 15% from the left. But that's not all. For example, if we were to change the sizing for this, and we would want to center it for a tablet and a mobile version, then we would need to jump back into our code and add media queries as well. So a media query would have a look at the max width and maybe use something like 992 pixels. And then we would have to customize that button to have a position of either relative, or change the left position here to 50% and the top position for 50% as well. And then try and maybe adjust it to work as we test out the browser. Whereas literally now we can just move it about. It saves us so much time that it's unbelievable. So we'll get into more examples of this in future videos, but surely that gives you a brief idea of what the differences are using code versus no code, and some of the things we'll be exploring in future videos.